When a palace burns, the fire starts long before the first torch is lit. It begins in the quiet humiliations of the hungry and desperate. This is the autopsy of a kingdom that pushed its people too far, and the inevitable explosion that followed. Before the uprising, this society was defined by a rigid, two-tiered caste system. On one side were the Freeborns, the royalty who held every scrap of political power. On the other were the slaves, captives from ancient wars living as permanent outsiders. As the slave population grew, the ruling class tightened the screws by weaponizing basic survival. They began systematically blocking slaves from fetching water at the communal rivers, turning a basic human necessity into a point of violent state control. This math illustrates the scale of the theft. The Akaku ancestral farmland, a massive territory, was historically communal. But corrupt elders manipulated local youth to rezone this land for the elite, digging graves to threaten anyone who spoke the truth of its origin. Stripping a population of its land and water is never an accident. It is the calculated, quiet phase of a ruling class preparing for a purge, disabling a group's ability to survive before physical violence even begins. The physical enforcement of this brutal regime rested entirely with the princess, the embodiment of state-sanctioned terror. She used routine torture to maintain the hierarchy, brutalizing slaves for minor infractions like failing to show her the proper royal respect. But random cruelty wasn't enough to justify the total eradication the elders desired. They orchestrated a false flag operation, ambushing the slaves in the contested farm fields and claiming the captives attempted to assassinate freeborn leaders. The princess used this fabrication to justify a draconian crackdown, locking the framed slaves in the royal dungeon with explicit instructions to starve them, while she personally prepared a lethal poison to ensure no one left the cell alive. When a group is forced into a choice between quiet extermination and violent resistance, the state loses its greatest leverage. Backed into a dark corner by a tyrannical regime, the slaves realized they had absolutely nothing left to lose. Total slaughter was only avoided because of a fracture within the elite. A sympathetic warrior named Igodo and a hesitant king orchestrated a conditional release, forcing the slaves into exile rather than the grave. This exile forced the captives to see the truth. The political system was engineered for their submission. They realized that diplomacy was impossible within a framework where the law itself was a weapon of the oppressor. Their survival now depended on Iwabe, a fearless slave warrior. But Iwabe understood that muscle alone could not win this war. The freeborn elite were protected by deeply entrenched mystical powers that made their authority seem divinely untouchable. If the rules of the kingdom are designed to keep you a slave, true justice requires you to step outside those rules entirely. The rebellion had to find a power that could override the king's magic and break the state's monopoly on force. Iwabe stands at the edge of this transition, revealed as the prophesied son of the gods. His physical strength is now secondary to a mythic lineage that demands he enter a world most men are too terrified to name. His mission takes him deep into the haunted, forbidden forest of Lakua. He must navigate a landscape of spirits to reach the legendary shrine of Odaya, a place where the laws of the kingdom no longer apply. Within the heart of the shrine lies the objective, the red lizard's egg. This isn't just a relic. It is the ultimate equalizer, glowing with a power that predates the current royal bloodline. The egg is the only artifact capable of neutralizing the magical defenses protecting the freeborn ruling class. Without it, the rebels are fighting iron. With it, they are fighting flesh and blood. Reaching the shrine is the moment the slaves move from being victims of history to the authors of it. They have acquired the necessary leverage to topple a regime that previously considered itself untouchable. While Iwabe hunted for the egg, the capital collapsed. The king was removed from the board, murdered by the very conspirators who helped fuel the ethnic tensions, leaving a massive power vacuum in the palace. In an act of pure hubris, the princess staged an illegal coronation. She moved to seize absolute power for herself, declaring a new era where her word was the only law in the land. Her final objective was the total elimination of her enemies. She planned to use her new authority to launch a systematic genocide against the slave class, finishing what the elders had started in the farm fields. She believed the coronation would be her ultimate victory, but her focus on the crown blinded her to the revolution that had already assembled at her own gates. The clash was inevitable. Just as the princess moved to finalize her rule, Iwabe and the armed slave rebellions stormed the palace. They didn't come to negotiate for better conditions, they came to dismantle the system that created those conditions. With the magic of the egg neutralizing the elite's defenses, the slaves shattered the princess's reign in a single afternoon. They neutralized the guards and violently tore down the caste system that had defined their lives for generations. A kingdom built on the denial of dignity is a kingdom living on borrowed time. When systemic oppression becomes the law, rebellion becomes the only logical response. True power does not reside in royal bloodlines. It rests with those who refuse to be anything less than free.